Secretary of State Tony Blinken says over the next 2 months, while Joe Biden is still technically the puppet in power, the president of the United States, until Donald Trump is sworn in on January 20th, they're going to do everything that they can to give as much of our tax dollars as possible to Ukraine.
President Biden is committed to making sure that every dollar we have at our disposal will be pushed out the door between now and January 20th.
Well, no wonder the Pentagon failed their 7th audit in a row and have been unable to account for the $824 billion of our money that they have been given, which I guess is really nothing compared to the $2.3 trillion that the Bush the Bush administration lost, which we learned about the day before 9/11. Of course, nobody has been indicted for these strange and recurring accounting anomalies, let alone fired or probably even suspended. But if you're Rodger Ver, arguably the most popular Bitcoin advocate in the world, which gained him the nickname Bitcoin Jesus because of his evangelism for the technology and the cryptocurrency, not a name that he gave himself, one that others gave him because of his passion for the project, then the Biden administration indicts you for tax evasion for something that happened 10 years ago, even though you're not even a U.S. citizen, because there's a dispute over what's called an exit tax. And I'm sure his book, Hijacking Bitcoin, The Hidden History of BTC, which came out just a few weeks before his arrest, had absolutely nothing to do with that whatsoever. Rodger Ver decided to renounce his U.S. citizenship 10 years ago and move to the Caribbean after he was released from prison, serving 10 months in a federal penitentiary for the crime of selling fireworks on eBay without a license. You can sell fireworks online in the early 2000s when eBay and the internet was really just getting started. So you could sell fireworks, and you still can sell fireworks online. You just need a license. So he didn't have the license, and instead of just issuing him a fine, they arrested him, and then instead of just giving him probation, put him in prison for 10 months, probably because I think he was involved in running for city council in his local community of Silicon Valley and was ruffling some feathers up there. So it left a really bad taste in his mouth for the United States government. So being one of those hardcore principled libertarians, he literally renounced his citizenship and then left. But when people do that, the government makes them pay what's called an expatriation tax, which is a very hefty tax on everything that they own, all of their property, their entire net worth, everything. But because he's Bitcoin Jesus, he had been buying Bitcoin since day one, many of them just for pennies. But because Bitcoin has been hitting astonishingly high values, approaching $100,000, the government now claims that he owes them millions. And I read through this 26-page indictment, which claims that some of the Bitcoins that he paid tax on were classified as part of his business, not his personal assets. And so those were taxed differently. So that's tax evasion because one of his old businesses, memorydealers.com, accepted payment in Bitcoin. So they had accumulated a sizable amount. And it wasn't until 2014 that the IRS officially issued notice of how the virtual currencies, cryptocurrencies, should be treated in terms of tax purposes. They claimed that it was property. And then on property, when you sell it, you have to pay a capital gains tax. And so a lot of people hadn't been paying the capital gains taxes. So they did the courtesy of sending out tens of thousands of letters to people who had accounts on Coinbase and other exchanges who their forensic auditing realized weren't paying the proper taxes. And so they started sending them out letters saying, hey, here are the new rules. Make sure that you amend your tax returns and pay what you supposedly owe. But right after Rodger's book came out, which doesn't just detail the history of Bitcoin, it goes deep into the forking of Bitcoin into Bitcoin Cash and the big block versus the small block wars and all this kind of complicated technical stuff. If you're a Bitcoiner, then you know. I'm not a Bitcoiner, but I went down that rabbit hole back in 2020 and have a pretty good idea. And so Rodger was very upset that the current form of Bitcoin was hijacked, hence the title of his book, from a peer-to-peer electronic cash system that was truly independent and organic to something else. To basically being co-opted by the big banking cartel that the original white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto, a pseudonym, titled Bitcoin a Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System, was opposed to. So it only makes sense to me when President Trump commutes the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to get the Department of Justice, hopefully headed by Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, to drop this ridiculous lawfare against Rodger as well. And the only thing I can think of to help get the word out is to use the hashtag FreeRodgerVer And go to freerodgernow.org and sign the petition. I'll try to remember to leave a link to it down in the description below when I upload this video. This is one of the reasons why I didn't post a Bitcoin address and start accepting tips in Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, especially after the YouTube adpocalypse back in 2017, because the more I started looking into it, even though I think it's a brilliant concept, a brilliant technology, the tax issues are so convoluted, especially with people sending in $5, $10 tips in Bitcoin, and then you're supposed to account for that $10 change in value to pay the capital gains tax on that particular amount. It just became an accounting nightmare, and so it was something that I didn't want to get involved in. And if you want to learn more, you can read and share this article from Zero Hedge, Why Rodger Ver Deserves a Presidential Pardon. And back in 2020, during the COVID lockdowns, when I went down, I guess a lot of people went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole with all that extra free time. I started watching Bitcoin documentaries and reading books about it, and then I finally began to grasp what it was that people were so excited about. And I still had and still do have concerns and reservations about the cryptocurrency, about the technology, about it being an actual currency because it fluctuates in value so rapidly, and some other issues. But I have the utmost respect for Rodger Ver. And back when I was researching it and watching all the documentaries, reading the books and listening to podcasts, his name kept coming up. And then I noticed that he followed me on Twitter. So I sent him a DM and I asked him if I could have some of his time to ask him some questions about it. And he was gracious enough to hop on a Skype call, and we talked for probably 2 hours. One of the perks of being a famous YouTuber, I do have access to some pretty cool people. And while I don't name drop a lot, I'm just mentioning this because he was gracious enough to give me his time. Very knowledgeable, very humble, the real deal. So when I saw he got indicted, and knowing his backstory about why he renounced his U.S. citizenship and why he was actually arrested in the early 2000s for selling fireworks without a license, and an admirer of his ethos. So I think we should do everything we can to help educate the Trump administration and Matt Gaetz by tweeting to him in order to get them to drop these kangaroo court charges and end this political witch hunt. I mean, we're talking about an administration, the Biden administration, that indicted a guy for posting a meme on Twitter 5 years earlier as one of their first acts as soon as old Joe was sworn in. And if you like memes, my YouTube channel, and Christmas sweaters, then I know you're going to love my custom special order knit Trump Claus sweater, which is available from markdice.com, or click the link in the description below. But you have to order them by Saturday. This is different than the Trump Claus classic sweatshirt and t-shirt. Those are like screen printing or direct-to-garment printing, where the graphic is printed onto the fabric itself. This is totally different. These are knit sweaters, and the yarn is different color. And so Trump Claus is literally woven into the fabric of the sweater itself. These mock-ups don't even do it any justice. These are absolutely fantastic. Available in red, green, and black, but you have to order them from markdice.com by Saturday. So head on over there or click the link in the description below and check them out.